This is Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom, words on leadership, goal setting, and productivity, and really a whole lot more. Consider this a vitamin or a supplement for your mind, your heart, and your soul. Wherever you download podcasts, would you please leave a rating and write a brief review? It would be very, very helpful. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about, let's go back to leadership boot camp. You know, it's boot camp that in the military is used to whip people into shape. It's basic training. It's getting yourself prepared. And I want to just talk about if we were going to leadership boot camp, what would be the lessons they would seek to instill within us? And let's just start with this one. First of all, you can't lead people farther than you yourself have gone. I think of for so many years when I would be leading people and talk about the disciplined life, and yet my life wasn't all that disciplined in the early years. And if you're going to tell people that you need to do certain things, you'd better make sure you're there yourself. And so I've tried to take those steps to not ask people to do things that I'm unable or unwilling to do. You wouldn't take advice on financial planning and investment from somebody drowning in debt and nearly bankrupt themselves. You want to take advice from someone who has more than just methodologies and scenarios that you should follow, but someone who's actually followed their advice, gotten out of debt, saved money, and invested money. So you're only going to follow someone who knows what they're talking about. And so this is the reason, as leaders, we have to constantly be improving, constantly be concerned about bettering ourselves and making improvement, reading, talking to people, going to seminars, taking a class, all of the things you need to do to continue to get better. Because you as a leader, no matter what authority position you're in, no matter what you're trying to accomplish, you are not going to lead people any farther than you have been. At boot camp, they push people beyond what they think they can do, beyond what they think they can endure. And if you're going to be a leader, you need to go to leadership boot camp, and you need to get yourself stretched beyond what you think you can do. You need to push yourself beyond whatever self-limiting barriers you've placed on yourself. Because if you're going to lead someone, you can't lead them farther down the road than what you have traveled. So lead yourself. That's the first principle of leadership, and the first principle we're going to talk about today in Leadership Boot Camp. The second thing that I think that's indispensable to learn in this Leadership Boot Camp is be yourself. I've already told you, everyone else is taken. Be yourself. Whatever field of endeavor that you're in, we all have gurus that we follow, or heroes, or women and men that we look up to. And one of the first things that we'll start doing is try to mimic the way they stand, copy the way they dress, try to ask the same questions they ask. And that is indeed a form of leading. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all need excellent role models. But could you just relax for a moment? Let's go back to Leadership Boot Camp. Be yourself. You have to lead from your heart. Your heart is more than the blood pumping muscle in your chest. Your heart is the totality of all that goes into making you you. Do you realize your past, your present, all the things you have experienced give you a wealth of information and opportunities to pass on to others? You have gone through and experienced the things you have gone through to learn lessons, and then to help pass those lessons on to the women and men that you come in contact with. In order to be yourself, you have to have a pretty healthy self-image, and you have to have personal awareness. We all know how uncomfortable it is to be around someone who has absolutely zero self-awareness. They do not realize how others are receiving and or perceiving them. they bloviate and talk and say, this is what I'm going to do, and no one is much paying any attention. One of those things that you need to know if you're going to be yourself is you need to know that, yes, everyone with listening to the sound of my voice, you have strengths that are unique to you. There are things that you do very well. Sometimes it's innate talent or gifts that have been given to us by our Creator. Many times it's just certain job responsibilities we had or affinities we had where we just put in more time doing certain things, and those things have become our strengths. But for every one of us that has a strength, we also have some corresponding weaknesses. I am a firm believer that many times our weaknesses are overextensions of our strengths, but there are certain areas in our lives that are weaker. And you know, there are two schools of thought. There are some people who seem to work all of their lives trying to improve their weaknesses, and they never enhance their strengths. There's another school of thought that says, forget about your weaknesses, just keep working on your strengths and minimizing your weakness. Now, this is an area where I'll probably take a middle ground. I do believe you need to work on your strengths and continue to enhance them. And with your weaknesses, if you're in a position to hire someone to help you with take care of your weaknesses, that's one thing. But at least try to minimize where they're not so prevalent and causing you so many difficulties. I was in an interview a few weeks ago. I wasn't the one being interviewed. A group was interviewing a person for a position. And I was surprised that the candidate didn't kind of intuitively know that there's always, usually in every interview process, a strengths and weakness kind of question will be asked by somebody. And what I noticed about this young person is they readily answered their strengths and they rattled on at what they were really good at, and it was well done. Well, surely they should have anticipated that the follow-up to that question was going to be, and what are your weaknesses? And the person looked like a deer in the headlight, as if they could not think of a weakness. And I know what happens. That young person knew what his weaknesses were. It's hard to confess that when you're trying hard to make it through an interview, and weaknesses still in many people's minds is a sign that because I have a weakness, I am a weak person. And he stuttered and stammered around, and he didn't say it quite this well. But here's what the bottom line was that the group interviewing him took it to say. He finally, out of frustration, said, you know, my weakness is I really don't have any. And I still laugh about that. If you don't have any weaknesses, you don't have a weakness, you are delusional. And you need a reality check, because there's not a person, the greatest leader you know on planet Earth, has weaknesses. So work on your strengths, minimize your weaknesses, lead from your heart. And then the third thing that I think you need to hear when we're going through a leadership boot camp is, remember, leadership is a process. It's not a destination, it's really a journey. And you're going to continually need to be improving. That has always been true, but it is absolutely essential in the day and age in which we live right now. Things are changing so rapidly. I'm old enough to remember when I splurged and bought a fax machine for my office. I mean, we were uptown, we were technologically savvy, and we had this fax machine, and we were going to really be humming now as an office. In that day, that was a cutting-edge tool. Today, if you want to see a fax machine, you'll probably have to go to the Smithsonian or Google it and look for a picture. And if you just stopped then and said, I'm not going to invest in any more technology, we have a fax machine, that's good enough, that is what I need, you would have missed all the variations that have happened down through the years. Well, I've met some leaders who are still operating like they're fax machines. They were up to date 25 years ago, but they haven't learned anything new. They've forgotten that leadership, there isn't a tool that I get, an item that I learn, and I can just rest and say, man, I know it all. They understand that it's a process. As a young leader, my toolbox was rather empty. I had one rather large hammer in my leadership toolbox. And when your only tool is a hammer, you have a tendency to view every problem, circumstance, and even person as a nail that needs to be hammered. There'll come times in your life you're going to have to change your processes and stretch and become a different and better leader. When you're in leadership boot camp, you're going to have to understand a few other things. First of all, any way we want to slice it, regardless of what words I may want to use to try to dress up leadership, at its heart, leadership is work. And everything you're going to do in life is work, and you just need to make up your mind really early. I'm going to work at whatever it is I've been called to do. If you're going to be a leader, you have to be intentional. That's a basic boot camp kind of a principle. You can't just be a wandering generality. You can't just go with the flow and allow phone calls and emails to dictate how you're going to live your life. You need to be an intentional leader that is taking a group somewhere for a reason. Another boot camp thing that you need to understand about leadership is there's going to be some sacrifice. Now, not all of the time, but there'll be some late nights. There'll be some times when you have to really pull together. And if you're going to do this, you're sacrificing the ability to do something else. Don't let anyone kid you. If you're going to be an effective leader, you're going to have to sacrifice some things along the way. And the last thing that I want to talk about in Leadership Boot Camp is it needs to be shared. Leadership is best enjoyed shared. Early in my ministry, early in my leading, I was pretty much a solo. I was doing it on my own. And then along the way, I was able to build staff. And I can say today that some of the greatest joys I know right now are the fact that people who worked with me who have now gone out and have really even far surpassed anything I have done. And I just want to give a shout out to them. It was so fun sharing leadership, and I'm so proud to see how effective they are. I was just with one of them, Jeff Carterman in Plymouth, Michigan, just a few days ago. He's doing a splendid job. And Joanne in Livonia, Michigan, and Debbie in Troy, Michigan are doing outstanding jobs, and it was wonderful working with them, having them on staff with me. And Craig over in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Eric down in Kissimmee, Florida, who is doing a fantastic job, and Doug out in Pismo Beach, California. I could go on and on. But as you get older, especially in your leadership, what you will take joy is not what the world thinks are accomplishment. It is the people who came alongside and shared leadership with you and have now gone out and have even surpassed the things that you were able to do. Don't take this leadership journey solo. Take folks along with you. Pour your life into them. Learn from them. Experience life together. There's nothing quite like it in all the world. Thanks, gang, for sharing your lives with me. This is Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom. Words on leadership, goal setting, and productivity, and a whole lot more. I hope today this has been a vitamin or a supplement for your mind, your heart, and your soul. Wherever you download podcasts, would you consider subscribing to Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom? Leave a rating and a brief review. The more ratings and the more reviews, it just helps other people be able to find this podcast. Until next time, you are doing better than you think you are, and you, my friend, are making a difference. Have a great and blessed week.